A staple I do in all interviews in order to start things off is to ask that you elaborate a bit about your work and this particular role for those not familiar with it.
My name is Stephen Russell, and I have been a voice actor as well as other things for since 1996 when I first started working for Looking Glass Technologies in Cambridge, Massachusetts. The role for that we're probably primarily going to be talking about today, and for which I'm probably best known at the moment, anyway, is Nick Valentine, who was introduced in Fallout 4 and then continued into the DLC Harbor. Yeah, yeah, that one. And I've also voiced all of the Codsworths and all of the Mr. Handys in the Fallout series for a number of years now, continuing on into Fallout 76.
In Fallout 4, you provide the performance for Nick Valentine. Can you tell us a bit about the character and the situation he finds himself in?
The character is a synth detective who has his office in Diamond City in what's left of Boston at that point. That alone appealed to me because I'm a big baseball fan, and that was clearly modeled on Fenway Park, the home of the Boston Red Sox and the oldest Major League Baseball stadium in the country. And so that was kind of a fun little side thing that I always kept in my mind. Um, he's one of many companions that you can travel with in Fallout 4 as a player, and he has a strong moral compass. And in that respect, I really enjoyed bringing that character to life. I think he's someone who is. They set up a nice irony in creating the character that he is a synth. However, he's probably one of the biggest hearted characters in the show in the game. And so that contrast is always kind of fun to play with. And I was just delighted to get that part and to have a chance to explore him and bring him to life.
Fallout 4 has been something that's resonated with players for a long time. Did you anticipate this sort of well loved response to the character and that this game would still be of such interest almost a decade on?
We had done one session of Nick Lines, and when I came in to do a second session, which was maybe 3 months later, more content had been written at that point. There was a buzz even before the game was released within the offices at Bethesda. So I was told that people were kind of predicting that he would end up being a favorite character, and was getting some really good response just internally. And that's always very gratifying to hear. Certainly at the top when you're going into a session too. Hey, people like this character. Oh, great. I'll enjoy doing him even more today then. And then once the game was released, it was especially fun to just hear from people and to know that the character was working for so many folks.
I imagine it may be somewhat difficult to remember since it's been so long, but were you given any initial direction in regards to the character, just in terms of an example of prep work to get into the mindset of this particular performance?
Yeah, we spent a little time. I spent time working with Mark Lampert, who was the audio director at Bethesda at the time, just kind of refining the voice, deciding on a tone for him. Um, and Mark and I have worked together enough over the years now that I think he has a good sense of what I can ask of him, and I'm always so appreciative of what the writers at Bethesda bring to the table. It was pretty clear just reading the script what the intentions were for this guy.
Fallout 4 has levels of romance to it. Were you surprised to find so many other characters are able to be romanced outside of Nick? And does it surprise you that so many wanted to romance Nick Valentine even though he is a synth?
And what can I say? I guess I did a good job making him appealing. Uh, but I mean, look at that face behind you too, Jason. It's how could you not love that guy? Those beady yellow eyes.
He's all charm.
Yeah, yeah. So that's been a fun little side thing too. But I tend not to take it too seriously.
Well, it may have been touched upon. You do actually voice many characters in the universe of Fallout, not only in Fallout 4, but also Fallout 76, and if we stretch back further, Fallout 3. Could you tell us a bit about your experience being Mr. Handy, Mr. Gutsy, or, well, Codsworth to some?
Yeah, that's been really fun because while there is a kind of bog standard Mr. Handy, there are all these variations on Mr. Handy too, and I'm often asked to, put a little twist on him, make this one a little bit different. And I just love doing Mr. Handy. I could do him all day long, and the sessions where we had to do all those names so that we could personalize the experience of Mr. Handy talking to you was just hilarious. And so I have a great fondness for all the handies.
Yeah, I will say that most people I talk to really appreciate that he actually says your name most of the, like, almost every time. It seems like he does every name.
Yeah, yeah, we went through a lot of names, hundreds and hundreds of names, and multiple sessions getting those down.
Well, it is well appreciated within the community, I've noticed. Who's your favorite character to voice outside of Nick or Mr. Handy in the Fallout universe?
Oh gosh, I tend to not think in those terms. The answer that I often give to that question is whatever one I'm working on right now. Um, however, um, I have a great fondness for the first character that I ever voiced in game work, and that was Garrett in the Thief series. And that has it, it, that's probably the other character that I've worked on that I get asked about uh, as often, if not more, than Nick Valentine.
Which leads perfectly into my next question. You have a long history of voicing characters in games. For those unaware, you voiced Garrett in the original Thief games and had a role in System Shock 2 back in the day. How has voice acting changed over that period of time from the late 90s to now, from your perspective?
From my perspective, it's changed a lot, actually. And one of the big changes is when I first started doing this work, it was all non-union. And then at some point in the 2000s, it began to be a more unionized workforce. And I was able to join the union myself, which doesn't have a lot to do with the mechanics or the performance of the game, but it is a nice recognition that the work that we're doing is of is something that is a professional caliber, I guess. So that's one thing. When I first started working at Looking Glass on the Thief games, I was actually recording in their studios, and the sound booth, the isolation booth, if you can even call it that, was a closet that had a lot of discarded PCs in it, and it didn't even have a music stand. Fortunately, fortunately now when I go into a studio, it's a little bit better appointed. I don't have to stand holding pages of text for hours at a time. And oh man, I remember the feeling in my arm. It's finally getting to put those pages down. But the thing that hasn't changed very much is that it's still being produced by incredibly dedicated and really smart people who constantly amaze me with the level of detail that they bring to these characters and these games. So that's always exciting to be a part of that collaboration.
There have been some rumors of a Fallout 3 remaster in the pipeline. Any thoughts on that? And would you lend your voice if it were needed?
Well, if they ask me, sure. This is the first I've heard of it, so
Oh,
uh,
okay.
yeah,
Yeah, it's supposed
yeah.
to be coming up pretty soon, allegedly,
Okay.
from some court documents that kind of leaked out. But
Uh-huh.
yeah, is that something that would be interesting to revisit? Some older character voices that you've done?
Yeah, I guess. I don't even remember that game very well at this point. That was my introduction to Bethesda. And I know I did a lot of minor characters in that game, as well as Harold the Tree. And I guess I did some Mr. Handies in that one too. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were also Corvo Attano in Dishonored 2. If we can squeeze that in, I'd love to hear about your approach to adding a deeper narrative for that character in the sequel. Additionally, if there was a Dishonored 3, if that would be interest of you, should that character fit into it?
Sure. Of course. Love to. Um, yeah, a job, I'll take it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that was an interesting experience because, the first game, the character had not been voiced. And uh, there was a there was an there was a session that I went to when they were considering a voice for that game, and somehow it didn't pan out. So coming into it, it was like, for me, I just had to approach it as if I was starting something completely fresh, and uh, just go with what was on the page.
Fair enough. It's just interesting because there's I don't know if there's expectations because you have a first game where there's a protagonist that's not really saying anything. I would imagine outside of like ah ooh ah you kind of like your first person sounds, and then you're coming in and giving him a full voice in the sequel is kind of an interesting angle.
Yeah, and apparently it worked. I think people what was interesting about that game was having both a male and a female protagonist, and so it was when I finally got to see parts of it, I was excited about just that experience of kind of sharing a role in a way, or sharing uh, a quest.
You have ever so many roles in the Bethesda games. Could you briefly talk about your experiences with the indie darlings, The Elder Scrolls V, Skyrim, Prey, and Starfield most recently?
Start with Skyrim, and I voiced a lot of characters in that game. A lot of shopkeeper kind of folks, and a dog too. Um, I get asked about the dog every now and again, and I love that dog. Um, and that was early on too in my connection with Bethesda. So it was a good experience. It was also a good experience because it was a franchise that I was already somewhat familiar with. It had been played more than a few times in our household, earlier Elder Scrolls games. So it was kind of fun to be launched into a game that I had some history with. And let's see, it was lots of fun. The thing that I always talk about, Jason, with Bethesda is I just love the writing. It's so good, and they really know how to create concise and clear dialogue that is uh, unambiguous. It's a great gift for an actor to. There are very few times in a session when I'll have to ask a director, "What the hell am I talking about here?" Because the intentions are always right there, and yet expressed often so beautifully, and with this characteristic dark sense of humor that, especially in the Fallout games, I just love. Let's see, Prey. Oh boy, I didn't have a lot to do in that game. I think I died pretty early, but it was, but it was kind of fun to just have that. I do remember that session, and it's sort of the opening moment in the game, uh, and it was. That's it. You don't want me? No, you're gone now. Okay. Um, Starfleet was a joy. Everything that I Starfield, God, yeah. Sorry. Um, it was just great fun. And again, because our household has always been big Star Trek, Star Wars fans, it was nice to uh, just even think about that you were going to be part of this whole space adventure that was even bigger than either of those franchises. Uh, Pretty cool.
So I've been told by one of my Skyrim fanatic pals, and this is gonna tie into your dog, that I simply must ask you firstly about being Mercer Frey, who has a rather dynamic role in the game, the Thieves Guild individual.
Mhm.
And what was it like to voice the Daedric god Clavicus Vile, and as well as his dog Barbas?
Oh, nothing but fun. I love this work. It's and the fact that uh, Bethesda often lets me play, and within the context of those very specific scripts that I was just talking about, there's always a little room for improvisation and for taking it in an interesting direction, and I always like it when I'm working and somebody says, "Well, what else have you got?" and gives me an opportunity to maybe expand on something a little bit, take the voice in a slightly different direction. You never want to go into cartoon land, but for me, it's really fun when I can take on a voice that is a little bit more, outside the norm, create something with a completely uh, unique sound. And they've allowed that to happen over the years. And the dog was one of those instances, and Clavicus too, I think. I'm trying to remember. I don't actually have a great memory of what that voice sounds like at this point, but I do remember thinking that it was a fun session.
What's it like to see your voice attached to a game character?
Sometimes quite surprising, actually. There have been, especially early on, um, I would sometimes voice a character, and then the game would come out, and I'd see what that character looks like, having not been shown concept art. And I'd go, "Oh, really? Okay." So I might have made a different choice for the voice if I had seen that character beforehand. But then sometimes that contrast, a voice that doesn't necessarily completely belong with that character, will make for a more interesting character in itself. And the prime example of that is oh God, I'm blanking on his name right now. Harris, the villain in Thief 2, uh, who I had this very kind of whiny voice for. And when I saw the image of what he actually looked like, he didn't look a bit like that voice, but that voice coming out of that image ended up being really interesting, I think.
As I've mentioned, you have an incredible list of performances across many games, and sometimes there are multiple characters in the game. What's your approach like in making various characters come to life for a single project while also making them feel and sound distinct from the others you're voicing?
Well, let me take the back half of that question first, because I've only got one set of pipes. And as as much as I try, my range is always going to be finite. I can't, just keep coming up with new voices all the time. Mel Blanc, I'm not, um, but I sure wish I was. And though he's dead now, so maybe I don't wish that. And so, in a way, I have to kind of ignore what I've done before and just go with what seems appropriate for this particular character, for this particular game. and hope that because of the writing or the circumstances, or that I'm X many years older than I was when I did that last game, it's going to sound slightly different anyway. I try to be conscious of not repeating a voice if possible, but sometimes people will say, "Can you do something like what you did in this other game?" And and that's that's my job then.
Well, I think you've kind of maybe hinted towards this as well earlier, but I take it you've enjoyed doing the voice acting over the years, and this is something you'll continue to do forward. Uh, might we see you down the road for Bethesda's upcoming The Elder Scrolls 6 by chance? Or, well, if the opportunity arises, will you perform a number of characters for that game?
Well, I'm always happy when I get a call from Bethesda. So will I work with them again? Boy, I sure hope so. Do I have anything that I can tell you about coming up right now? And nope.
Lastly, I would like to leave a spot for you to say something or go over anything I might have missed during the interview. Any projects or anything you're working on?
There's nothing I can talk about right now that feels like it's particularly relevant. And just a big thank you to everyone out there who's listening to this and watching this, and thanks for playing the games, and thanks for appreciating my work. If you do, it's been interesting to. I came to this work at a fairly from a sort of backdoor position. Um, God, I'm not being very articulate today. I, I was uh, I was surprised when this work became a part of my life, shall we say. And and it has been nothing but fun ever since to be working on these games, and then to get the appreciation from folks about my work on the games too.